Our next guest here tonight was probably not surprised to hear that the First Lady canceled her trip to Pennsylvania this evening because she is still dealing with lingering symptoms from the coronavirus. Her husband, the president, spent tonight at a packed campaign rally in Erie, Pennsylvania. Of course, no two cases are alike. And that's the point we want to make here. Some never develop symptoms but are carriers. Some recover seemingly quickly and perhaps after just a mild illness. Then there are the so-called long haulers, those who, make no mistake, feel fortunate every day to have survived it, though they are dealing with long-term, lingering and morphing symptoms that aren't yet fully understood. There's a lot of them, and there's strength in numbers. And now there is a movement with their interests in mind. To that end, we are so pleased to welcome to our broadcast Diana Berrent. She got sick in March and thought perhaps she had recovered, but her experience since then has turned her into an advocate for her fellow patients. While still in isolation, she founded the group called Survivor Corps. And Diana, I've got to say, I was so moved by your spirit and knowledge and your alarm in some of the previous interviews I've seen you do. Take us back second week of March, as I understand it. You're a young mom, early 40s, good physical shape, a photographer. You're living your life. You get sick, and as you put it, it's a Tylenol and Gatorade type sick. Take us through what happened after that.
So back in early March, Brian, we thought that this was something that you could, you had to wash your hands and not touch your face and you'd be safe. I was actually extremely careful. I had been watching the news. I'm not a germaphobe, but I am a news junkie, and I had been watching it coming. I got exposed on a meeting on March 9th. It was not a social meeting. A couple of the people at the meeting had been at a conference in New York in the previous few days that turned out to be a super spreader event. Everybody in the group was infected and one person died 3 weeks later. I had like you said, a Tylenol and Gatorade variety of COVID. I isolated at home under no medical supervision, just like 99% of people with COVID. And after 3 weeks, I thought that I was better. I ran out and immediately donated my plasma. I started participating in every trial that I could, knowing that so many of the mysteries about this virus, the answers lie in the bodies of survivors like me. And what happened after I started Survivor Corps was that people started sharing their stories, and we became sort of the canary in the COVID coal mine, so to speak. And so we started seeing things, long before it hit the media. We saw COVID toes months earlier. We saw all of these things. And what we started to see in April, at the end of April, were members of our group who were not recovering. And that started to raise some alarms. You see 1, you see 5, you see 10. When you see 20, it starts to become a trend. And now the CDC is saying that 1 out of 3 people infected with COVID are not recovering in the time expected. And of those, 1 in 5 are young, healthy people with no pre-existing conditions. And might I add that when they say young, that means 18 to 34. I'm 46. I don't count in that category. And one of the other things that we have learned since early March, Brian, is that this is not a respiratory disease. It is a vascular disease. And that explains why it is ravaging every single organ system in the body. And so we have members in their 20s, in their 30s, who are suffering heart attacks months after mild cases of COVID. They're having strokes, COVID-onset diabetes, COVID-onset lupus, really tremendous damage. I was actually recently diagnosed with COVID-onset glaucoma because any organ that has has blood supply there can be clots. And we are seeing, it is almost like these people have aged decades in a matter of months. Their youth has been torn away from them. They are not being believed by their doctors, and the numbers are growing in such frightening, it's just skyrocketing. We're looking at another huge public health disaster on our hands.
The notion of you having vision problems, especially given your occupation, is haunting and frightening. How else is it with you just today? How else did you feel differently today because of what happened to you on March 9th?
I have to say, I spent most of today in bed. I was having a lot of GI issues and headaches and inner ear pain. I will say that it comes and goes for me. And I will also tell you, Brian, I'm extremely lucky. What you're looking at here is not a typical long hauler. The people who are suffering from long-term COVID would not be able to do this interview right now because they would be in bed. They're incapacitated. Don't look at me as an example. I am a good spokesperson, but I'm not a good example. I am extremely lucky, and that's with glaucoma and with lingering symptoms 7.5 months into it.